the heartbreaking case of a beautiful woman, Julie Scully. Julie Marie Scully, an American woman, gave up everything to pursue love, but just a few months later, her body was found in a horrific state in a remote lake in Turkey. What turned her beautiful life into an international sensation case? Let's follow the case today. Julie was the daughter of Julia and John Scully. To understand her story better, let's consider her parents' situation. Julia was born in 1943 on an Indian reservation in New Mexico, home to the second largest Native American tribe in the United States. Life on the reservation was extremely challenging, with no electricity or running water and limited job opportunities due to widespread alcoholism. Many residents turned to substance abuse as a coping mechanism. At the age of 12, Julia's parents sent her to a boarding school to help her learn English and adapt to life outside the reservation. After moving to the city, she began to fit in as an average American and found work at a mental health facility. However, she became addicted to substances. Later, Julia met a police officer named John. They got married just 2 days before the one-year anniversary of their meeting. John took a job as a patrolman in one of the most dangerous areas of North Philadelphia. In January 1969, Julia became pregnant, and they welcomed their daughter, Julie. As Julie grew, she formed a very close bond with her father, and relatives noted that she would do anything to earn his approval. Father and daughter spent a lot of time together fishing, while Julia often felt sidelined in family life. During these times, she struggled with feelings of being an outsider. Although Julia hid her substance addiction, her erratic behavior raised concerns among those around her. Things worsened as Julia began to use more potent illegal addictions. Despite this, on November 10, 1969, Julie's brother, John Patrick Scully, was born. The new baby quickly became the center of attention for their parents, leaving Julie feeling unloved and neglected. Meanwhile, Julia's substance abuse continued, and she fell into a deep depression. In January 1973, overwhelmed, she took an entire pack of sleeping pills. Fortunately, John found her in time, administered first aid, and called for medical help. Julia was revived, but not only did the family learn of her addiction, the situation deteriorated further. She began to resemble a shell of her former self. Soon after, Julia attempted self-harm again due to depression, but this time she also was saved. The issues between her parents did not go unnoticed by their children, especially by Julie, who was 9 years old at the time. During her birthday party, friends gathered to celebrate, but in the middle of the festivities, their father left to see his mistress. He had been having an affair for a while, viewing it as an escape from his growing disgust for his dependent wife. He stayed with Julia only for the sake of the children. During the party, the mistress arrived at their home to pick up John, and Julie saw her leaving with him. He seemed completely unconcerned that his secret was now obvious. This revelation hit Julie hard, and Julia began to blame herself for the situation. Julia struggled to understand what was really happening. During this time, Julie had once been an excellent student, started to fall to a C average in school. John then decided to transfer her to a new school in Kensington. In here, Julie, a bright and beautiful girl, became very popular but also fell in with a bad crowd. She started skipping school, and her grades continued to decline. By this time, she was 12 years old and already looked attractive, attracting the attention of many boys. All this was aggravated by the fact that their family lived in a disadvantaged area, which made her parents increasingly afraid for Julie. Fearing she could become a victim of the addiction, one evening, Julie's friends were supposed to spend the night. But when the mother came to check on them, the schoolgirls were not in the room. Concerned, Julia contacted emergency services, and the police eventually located them in downtown Philadelphia. Julie's relationship with her mother was deteriorating, resulting in frequent arguments. Her rebellious behavior also troubled her father. Julia entered treatment for her addiction. During Julia's absence, the home environment became more peaceful. However, despite Julie's early attempts to please her father, her rebellious nature intensified. She continued to skip classes and perform poorly academically, due to spending more time with friends. When John learned of this, he was very upset. At the age of 14, Julie informed her father that she wanted to drop out of school. This decision likely stemmed from her feeling ignored by her parents. She was attractive and often the center of attention at parties, making her prioritize fun over her father's approval. By the age of 14, Julie had started living a sexual life. After graduating from high school, her parents began considering her future and special education needs. John helped her gain admission to a prestigious engineering school known for its strict selection process. He personally spoke to the director to ensure she would be accepted without facing competition, emphasizing that she was the daughter of an indigenous person, which he hoped would earn her some concessions. In the January, his efforts succeeded, and Julie enrolled in the engineering program. Meanwhile, her brother chose a different path. He joined the Navy as soon as he turned 16. During this time, Julie decided she was content with her life and dropped out of school to pursue financial independence. She began working and soon met a boyfriend. He was 6 years older than her. Their relationship progressed quickly, and they married in November 1985, just a few months before Julie turned 18. Although marrying provided her with financial support and emotional stability, their union was kept secret, even from her father. When John eventually found out, he supported the marriage, believing it was a better choice for Julie than living with a dependent parent. Unfortunately, the marriage ended in 1988, and Julie had to move back in with her mother. Despite finding a new job, she did not contribute to her mother's living expenses. Julie became more beautiful than ever, attracting attention every time she was in public. Many people even mistook her for a model and often asked if she was one. Over time, she started to leverage her beauty. Though she felt fragile and vulnerable inside, she was desperately searching for love, but only found brief connections. Many men invited her out on dates and to various events. This trend continued in July 1989 when she attended a stylish party at a yacht owners club. There, she met Timothy "Tim" Nist, a man 11 years her senior. He was a successful businessman who owned his own yacht. In the early 1998s, he started a landscape design company, and his business thrived during the boom of the U.S. real estate market. Julie and Tim's relationship progressed rapidly, but it soon became evident that Julie was very jealous. One day, when Tim was at a bar with another girl, Julie arrived and immediately hit him, leaving a bruise on his face. She also attacked the girl, who was actually Tim's longtime secretary and just an employee helping with the business. Although the situation was tense, the conflict was eventually resolved. Besides, Julie aspired to be a model and saw an advertisement for a beauty contest in a newspaper. Eager to participate, she and Tim gathered her best photos to submit them to the magazine hosting the contest. Unfortunately, they later discovered that the contest was a scam. The magazine used fake ads to collect free photos for their men's section, which was on the last page. One day, Tim arrived at his office to find his secretary absent. To his surprise, Julie was sitting at her desk with a friendly smile, claiming that the secretary would no longer come to work and that Julie had taken over her job. This arrangement allowed Julie to work from home, giving her more freedom and financial independence. Meanwhile, she kept checking her email to see if another magazine had responded to the beauty pageant, but there was no response at all, which made her very frustrated. Eventually, feeling cheated out of her prize, she went to a magazine's office and confronted the editor, demanding an explanation for the lack of recognition for her supposed win. In the end, the editor accepted her photos and promised to include them in the next issue. Julie told everyone about what happened and began to prepare for the competition, which later took place in an elite hotel. At the contest, 12 finalists participated, including Julie. Unfortunately, the judges selected other contestants, and only one person voted for her. Despite this setback, Julie formed a friendship with Cheryl Tuplis Hood, the magazine editor, and became this magazine's face, appearing on billboards throughout the city. This exposure increased her popularity, leading to numerous modeling job offers. Julie quickly gained fame, and her career flourished until the fall of 1990. She continued to work for SEMA while winning awards in smaller beauty contests. However, failures awaited her on the big podium. On November 16, 1991, Julie married Tim when she was 23 years old. They enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle and did not deny themselves anything until 1997. Julie's modeling career continued to grow, leading to more income and television appearances. However, she also began to struggle with alcohol abuse. Their marriage had its ups and downs, but overall, they shared love and understanding. Tim wanted children, and they had the financial means to support a family, but Julie was hesitant, fearing it might jeopardize her modeling career. In February 1995, she became pregnant. Despite her friends' concerns, she continued to drink and smoke during this time. On November 26, 1996, she gave birth to a daughter named Katie, which profoundly transformed her life, which Julie willingly accepted. During this time, Julia overcame her addictions and started to actively support her granddaughter. However, they frequently argued about parenting. Soon after, Julie began to struggle with postpartum depression, feeling unhappy because her pregnancy had affected her figure. She became withdrawn and didn't make an effort to return to her former self. Around the same time, her relationship with Tim started to deteriorate, especially in April of that year. They were compelled to see a family psychologist. Julie felt that the therapist favored Tim, but the therapist was actually trying to help her confront her issues and past traumas. Ultimately, the psychologist concluded that Tim was not spending enough time with Julie, putting their marriage at risk. Julie felt lonely and started reaching out to her friends. She came home intoxicated on November 1st. This is the 7th year of Tim's annual cruise tradition, which they had maintained since their wedding. This year, they decided to move the trip up to celebrate the Christmas holidays. The cruise was intended to strengthen Julie and Tim's relationship. They left Katie with her grandparents and flew to San Juan, Puerto Rico, where they boarded a cruise ship. Almost immediately, a man named George Skiadopoulos, who worked in the ship's engineering department, noticed Julie. Although he held a low-ranking position, he introduced himself as the captain. The next day, he had made a bet with a friend that he could start a romantic relationship with Julie. At just 22 years old and fresh out of college, George was at the beginning of his engineering career, but he looked respectable enough for Julie to believe him. He falsely claimed to be 28 and fabricated a few accomplishments to impress her. At that time, Julie was 29 years old, and she quickly became close to George. Tim noticed their interactions but was accustomed to Julie being friendly with strangers, so he didn't think much of it and felt no jealousy. Before a party, George offered Julie a tour of the engine room. During the tour, they shared a kiss, but nothing more happened afterward. When Julie returned home, she excitedly told a family friend about her feelings, thinking it was just a brief attraction since she believed she would never see George again. However, not long after, George sent Julie a seemingly innocent letter, and they began talking on the phone daily. He tried to persuade her that Tim wasn't good enough for her. These conversations were not hidden from Tim. He caught Julie a few times while she was on the phone, but chose to trust her without questioning what they discussed. This situation left Julie feeling conflicted. She was torn between the stability of the family and new sensations lover whom she missed so much, which caused her to become more distant from her husband and daughter. Noticing the change in her behavior, Tim grew concerned and wanted to mend their relationship. On January 3, 1941, he planned a surprise birthday party for her 30th birthday. The celebration went well, with many friends attending. During the party, Julie requested another cruise as a gift, specifying a particular ship and date. Tim was unaware of her true intentions to meet George again. He agreed to her request. On February 13th, Julie went on a cruise where she met George. After some intimate moments and returning home, Julie excitedly shared her experience with her friend Tony, who is also the godfather of Katie. Although he was trustworthy, it was hard for Tony to keep this secret to himself. Feeling a deep longing for George, Julie decided to visit him secretly. She framed the trip as a vacation with her mother and daughter. She revealed to her mother about her secret relationship, which led to disapproval, but this could not stop Julie. Initially, the plan was for Julie, Julia, and Katie to go to Florida together. However, by March 26th, she left them behind and traveled to Puerto Rico, where she betrayed love of her husband. Upon returning, Julie began to communicate more openly with George. She would frequently talk to him on the phone, send flirty love letters via email, and even create a video sharing snippets of her life. All of this she did without hiding it from Tim, with whom she still lived. Using her husband's earnings, she started going to parties and drinking regularly. Tim noticed these changes and suggested that they see a family psychologist after 7 years of marriage. One day, Julie expressed her desire to break up with Tim, but he opposed the idea. She owned a share in Tim's business, which was generating about $1 million annually. Julie was in dire need of finances as George was planning military service, which in Greece lasts 20 months. She attempted to help George obtain a visa to the USA, but by that time, she could no longer afford it. Struggling with emotional issues, she started taking antidepressants, which made George very angry, and he forbade her from continuing the medication. To impress her new boyfriend, Julie decided to get in shape. However, she had trouble sleeping due to taking sleeping pills and other strong medications, which led her to lose about 10 kg. She hoped to return to modeling to earn money, but George was very jealous and opposed her pursuing this career. Consequently, Julie had to abandon her plans. No one supported her relationship with this Greek man, not even Cheryl, who had previously shown interest in her. In a separate incident, Tim was unable to access a project document. When Julie refused to let him into her room, he had to call the police for help. Despite her resistance, he retrieved what he needed for work. Julie became paranoid, believing that Tim had hired a detective to spy on her. The tension in their home escalated, and it seemed inevitable that they were heading toward a divorce. By midsummer, George and Julie secretly got engaged while they were in the United States. This was done secretly, although she didn't hide from anyone that she was going to move to Greece. During this time, Tim started receiving monthly bills of $67 for international phone calls. Eventually, he discovered that she had been unfaithful to him by an engineer from a cruise ship, and they had been communicating with him behind his back. This revelation made Tim furious, and he decided to expedite the divorce process to eliminate any complications. In response, Julie attempted to restrict Tim's communication with Katie. She aimed to gain full custody so she could leave for another country without any obstacles, which Tim strongly opposed. While they was trying to resolve their issues, Julie's lover George informed her that he had quit his job and planned to visit her in New Jersey. During this time, Julie was under significant stress due to ongoing conflicts with Tim, which even caused her hair to start falling out. However, she believed that all this was due to separation from her beloved. Additionally, she became increasingly paranoid and jealous, demanding constant communication and obsessing over other women in George's life. When George arrived in New Jersey, their relationship took on a more chaotic tone. He frequently asked Julie for money, pressuring her to spend more than she could afford. Because of this, she was forced to take money from Tim, while she completely limited him communication with their daughter. Tim went weeks without seeing her, which drove him to frustration. Meanwhile, George constantly deceived Julie about his financial situation and employment status. It was surprising how unattractive this man was, the beautiful Julie, who literally crouched before him and was ready to give up her well-established life for him. Julie's friends and family were puzzled by her behavior. They tried to convince her to rethink her feelings, as they couldn't comprehend why she would fall for a bald, unemployed man with rotten teeth who was manipulative, deceitful, and excessively jealous. Despite their concerns, Julie seemed infatuated with him. She planned to use her divorce settlement to pay for a professional hair transplant for her boyfriend and fix her own teeth. When Tim learned about her plans, he was outraged, especially since he felt Julie was involving Katie in this situation. He threatened that if she attempted to leave, he would take Katie away, and she would never see their child again. This threat likely dampened Julie's enthusiasm momentarily. She even told her friends that she had ended her relationship with George. However, this was only a temporary setback. A few weeks later, she went to Greece with George to further develop their relationship. During this time, Julie met the parents of George, and they enjoyed the weekend. Because of the religious views of the boyfriend's parents, Julie was forced to hide her marriage and her daughter, as well as her modeling past. When she returned home, she dreamed of a future with her lover. On December 1st, she planned to leave Tim and their shared home. That day, she also left Katie and checked into a hotel. After using a significant amount of psychoactive drugs, Julie traveled to Greece on December 8, 1998. While there, she and her partner made plans for marriage and their life together. George convinced her to open a joint bank account, claiming she needed help with the language barrier. In her infatuation, Julie deposited $80,000 into the account and left an additional $18,000 in cash for expenses. This was all the money she had, and then she vanished without a trace. On January 8th, George called Julie's friend to report that she was missing. He said she was supposed to meet him near McDonald's for a snack but never arrived, despite him waiting for several hours. At that time, they didn't have mobile phones to reach her. After a lengthy search, George contacted the police to report his fiancée's disappearance. Shortly before these events, Julie called her friend to express how much she missed Katie and to share that she was having issues with her fiancé George. The friend sensed that Julie was considering leaving George, and she thought that Julie would return to the US soon. However, Julie never came back. Amid this, George's call was concerning. He informed her friend that Julie had disappeared and left her passport in the car, which the police later took. The problem was that George couldn't locate the officer who had taken the document, making his story seem suspicious. In response, the friend contacted Tim, who was the only one who could provide assistance. Tim quickly understood that Julie was in trouble. The last time she had reached out to her family in the US was on January 7th, and since then, no one had heard from her. Julie's mother described George as pathetic. Not only was he unattractive, but he also seemed to lack self-control. There was an incident where George became aggressive towards Julie when, during an argument with Julie, he yelled at her, grabbed her by the throat, and pushed her against the wall. He only released her when he heard the threat of police involvement. At this time, Julie attempted to end the relationship. Following this, Julia called the police, and George was deported. But then, despite the circumstances, Julie traveled to Greece to support her boyfriend. She defended him in every way possible, even taking responsibility for the attack. When she learned that Julie was missing, Julia suspected that her daughter's boyfriend was involved in her disappearance. George pretended to help with the search for Julie. During this time, Julie's family tried to reach the American embassy in Athens, but they faced a significant language barrier since no one at the Greek police stations involved in the investigation spoke English. In the United States, the FBI became involved in the case. It was revealed that Julie's passport had been with George the entire time, although he claimed he found it later. When George learned that the FBI was now investigating, he changed his story and said that Julie's documents had been stolen. His behavior grew increasingly suspicious. He attempted to withdraw money from their joint account but was unsuccessful. The couple was scheduled to get married on January 23, 1999. During this time, news outlets were covering the story of the missing American woman. George became agitated when he spoke on the phone with Julie's friend, who had alerted the media, George insisting he was innocent. He even gave statements to the press and participated in interviews to defend himself. 16 days later, George, the main suspect, was in the interrogation room. He continued to stick to the story he had shared with the media. However, after 4 hours of questioning, the police got him to confess to killing his lover. He claimed that it was an accident. George seemed to genuinely regret the incident, even shedding tears during the interrogation. Despite this, his account was filled with inconsistencies. At times, he insisted that Julie had not disappeared, only to later admit his guilt and then deny any involvement again. George explained that after moving to Greece, Julie quickly became unhappy and missed her home. She expressed a strong desire to return, and despite George's attempts to support her, her distress only deepened, which worried him. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Julie was constantly in tears. Furthermore, George's mother discovered that Julie had an ex-husband and a daughter in America, which made her feel disgusted with Julie. She openly expressed her disapproval to George. He was ultimately persuaded by his mother to leave Julie with such a complicated past. Their relationship was fraught with arguments, and they eventually were evicted from their hotel due to their conflicts. However, George exacerbated the situation. He prevented her from contacting her family and friends and physically abused her. It became evident that his mother struggled with schizophrenia and frequently required hospitalization. A lot of her issues seemed to have been passed down to George, who had an inflated sense of self-worth. As a result, he exhibited arrogant behavior. His manipulative tendencies were often noticed by friends and family. He disappeared at the slightest disagreement and immediately attacked his beloved. Besides, there was an incident where George's mother herself had a badly injured hand, but she justified herself by saying that she accidentally cut herself. Despite the abuse, Julie remained in the relationship. On January 8, 1999, the couple embarked on a long trip to Athens. As they drove along a deserted two-lane highway, their calm conversation spiraled into another argument. George eventually stopped in a remote area of the road where they were isolated from other drivers. George got out of the car and immediately attacked Julie, choking her in an attempt to silence her screams. George later told the police that it felt like he was watching the incident from outside his body. He felt completely powerless and couldn't stop until Julie showed no signs of life. Although he claimed the attack lasted only a few seconds, forensic experts indicated that strangulation typically takes at least 3 minutes. Afterward, George was in shock and contemplated burning her body and scattering the ashes into the sea from a cliff, intending to jump afterward to be with her. However, he ultimately abandoned this plan. Instead, he found himself in an interrogation room, which revealed his guilt. George claimed he had tried to take his own life using an air gun, jumping in front of a truck, and through an overdose of medication, but he was unsuccessful. Following the murder, he treated her body with indifference. He placed her in the trunk of his car and drove to the nearest gas station, where he purchased gasoline. He then returned to the scene, dragged her body away from the road near 2 small lakes, poured gasoline on her, and attempted to set her on fire. However, the fire didn't ignite because it started to rain. At one point, he thought about throwing her body into the lake, but instead placed the charred remains back in the trunk and drove to his grandmother's house. George discovered a large suitcase intended for travel and decided to pack the body inside it. By this time, rigor mortis had already set in and the body would not bend. Additionally, the head would not fit into the suitcase, so George resorted to cutting it off. He grabbed the head by the hair and raised it to the level of his face and later confessed to the police that he was horrified by the sight of her vacant eyes. Yet he still found her beautiful. He kissed her on the lips before placing the body into the suitcase. Afterward, he burned the suitcase and discarded it in a swamp, leaving the head behind. George then traveled to Kavala and threw Julie's head into the Aegean Sea. Tim and his family were informed of George's confession 19 days after Julie's disappearance. George, Julie's lover and intended husband, guided detectives to the murder site, where they discovered her remains. Tim traveled to Greece to bring her body back to her homeland. During this time, George confessed to the crime on live television. His mother suffered a stroke upon learning of his actions. Tim's father even remarked that George should have died alongside Julie. Despite this, many articles unfairly blamed Julie for the tragedy. Greek authorities described this murder as one of the most horrific cases known at the time. George's lawyers attempted to argue that he was insane, citing his mother's schizophrenia as a possible reason for his mental state. At one point, George expressed a desire for the death penalty, but Greece does not have capital punishment. In the United States, Tim became a source of support for Julie's family and friends. Despite Julie's infidelity, he proved to be a decent person. Friends of Julie, who remembered her fondly, believed that George initially exploited her for financial gain. When he found out that her husband was rich, he forced her to divorce for a tidy sum that the woman had to invest in his business. Before her death, Julie realized George's true intentions and decided not to invest in his projects, a decision that ultimately cost her life. George's trial began on November 27, 1999. Since February 2009, cases in Greece have been heard by 3 judges instead of juries, which has expedited the justice process. Notably, no defense witnesses were present during the hearings. On December 6th, the court found George guilty and sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Although it seemed that justice had been served, the Greek legal system faltered. In February 2002, George appealed his conviction, claiming he was insane at the time of the murder. His sentence was subsequently reduced to 23 years, and he was granted the right to appeal again. By February 2007, he was released and now lives with his new family in Kavala. The case of Julie Scully is a heartbreaking tragedy, with haunting details of the complex relationship. From a happy marriage, she began an affair with George Skiatopoulos, which led to irreparable arguments and conflicts that eventually led to her death. The case is not only a story of personal loss, but also a reflection of the complex elements of love, trust, and power in relationships. The media and public continue to investigate to clarify what really happened, but the story of Julie will forever be a painful reminder of the tragic consequences of toxic relationships. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our new channel, where we uncover captivating and chilling cold cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss the twists and turns we have in store. Let's continue. Jeremy Vargas was born on July 18, 1999, on the island of Gran Canaria. He was a friendly blonde boy who grew up with a passion for motorcycles, karate, and playing games with his cousins. He was the first child of Juan Francisco Vargas, commonly known as Juanfra and Ethisa Suarez, who had known each other since they were children and started a family at a very young age. Ethesa lived just a few houses away from Juanfra's family in the 80-housing neighborhood in Los Llanos on the island of Gran Canaria amidst undeveloped land and wind turbines. Even though they were very young and their relationship was unstable, Ethesa gave birth to their second child, Aiden, in February 2006. However, it seems that Aiden's arrival only highlighted the cracks in their relationship. Juanfra, then 22 years old, had been fond of partying in women since he was 15, and he also spent hours in the gym. Of course, these were not priorities for Ithaca, especially after having two children to look after. Due to all their differences, a few months after Aiden's birth, Ithaca left Juanfra. Following the separation, Juanfra moved back to his mother's house, Maria del Carmen, where he lived for a short period of time. He then began a sort of nomadic life without a stable partner or a fixed place to live, staying in one place one day and another place the next. He also lived temporarily in the houses of his new partners, resulting in him fathering 7 children with 6 different women throughout his life. A few months after the separation, Juanfra was working outside of the neighborhood. On Saturday, March 10, 2007, following tradition, Jeremy's maternal family gathered together. It was almost 2 in the afternoon, and while the grandparents, uncles, and Jeremy's mother were in the living room, he and his cousins were playing in the street. From the window, the adults could see the vacant lot located a few meters away, where the children were playing with a cardboard box from a TV bought days before. Jeremy was enjoying himself, using his plastic shovel to fill a small bucket with soil. The table was already set, and the grandmother called them from the window to come meet. All the children went up except for Jeremy. When his cousins entered the house, they went back to the vacant lot to hurry him up, but the 7-year-old was no longer there. Alarm bells rang and they asked the neighbors, but no one had seen anything or anyone. Jeremy's mother couldn't imagine that her son could have just disappeared like that. The family immediately reported the incident and expressed their concern because Jeremy had respiratory problems and was on daily medication. This condition was communicated to the civil guard, which responded promptly to the disappearance. It was unusual for him to be nowhere to be found. The next day, the civil guard and the police deployed a large search operation, which was later joined by the army, as well as neighbors and volunteers. The streets started to be plastered with posters of Jeremy's face. His shy nature led authorities to rule out the possibility that he had voluntarily gone off with a stranger. Only 5 days had passed on March 15, 2007, when Jose Segura, the government delegate in the Canary Islands at the time, revealed that the initial investigations were focusing on immediate family, friends, neighbors, and school. He added that they had a rational hope of finding the boy because controls had been activated at ports and airports and he had not left the island. The next day, the search operation extended to the coast, where divers also participated, looking for any clue that might lead them to Jeremy, but it was in vain. When a week had passed since the disappearance, more than 1,000 people joined the largest search operation ever conducted on the island to find a person. The year before, a girl named Sarah Morales had disappeared, and the population felt that history was repeating itself. Another minor had been taken from the arms of his parents. For the first month and a half, Jeremy's house remained open. Family members and neighbors slept in the garage, on sofas, mattresses, and the floor. The first posters, in black and white, included the family's phone number. Thousands of calls came in from the island, the mainland, and from abroad, including Mexico, China, and London. Many calls expressed sorrow or support, while others were malicious. Someone tried to extort €50 from the family in exchange for information, telling them to run because the boy was dying in a refrigerator. This was too much for the family, making them realize the cruelty that can emerge in such moments. On March 19, 2007, Jeremy's family's hope was rekindled. However, it was concluded that the subject did it with the intention of profit and they had no connection with the case. He was released 2 days later. In June of that year, then Minister of the Interior provided an update on the actions related to the case. He reported that they had received 600 calls regarding Jeremy's abduction, all of which had been investigated and some leads were being followed up on. However, to the family's despair, the case seemed to be growing cold. In January 2008, the arrest of a 37-year-old man for the attempted kidnapping of a 9-year-old girl in the Gran Canaria set off all the alarms. In relation to this person, a chilling detail emerged that caused a lot of pain to Ithaca. The individual owned an animal crematorium, and there were rumors that if he was the one who kidnapped Jeremy, he could have easily disposed of his body. However, the authorities conducted examinations in the incinerator and nothing was found. On the first anniversary of the disappearance, the family received support from their municipality, and that same year, the investigation was reinforced with 6 new agents from the Central Operational Unit. In January 2009, the mothers of Jeremy and another missing child, Sarah Morales, distributed 4,000 posters in Gran Canaria with photos of their children, hoping to prevent them from being forgotten. In 2010, investigators discovered a skull in a playground in the same locality where Jeremy disappeared. Initially, it was thought to be him, but after various analysis, it was confirmed to belong to a woman who had died 10 years earlier. On the 5th anniversary of the disappearance in 2012, the Civil Guard wanted to let the community know that they were still searching for the little boy. A new call for public collaboration was made to clarify a lead they received, which reported that a white car, driven by a man wearing a cap, was the key piece of the investigation. The community joined forces, and in less than 24 hours, the Civil Guard received more than 90 calls and emails with new leads. They thanked the public and stated that they were not ruling out any hypothesis, including family revenge, human trafficking, organ trafficking, and even pedophilia. They reported that 195 people accused of pedophilia were island. But it seems that the effort was in vain because nothing was found about the boy. Fernando Torres, a Carrot teacher who was involved in the biggest pedophilia case in Spain in 2010, was also under the authorities' scrutiny. He had given classes a few months prior to Jeremy's disappearance. He was sentenced to 302 years in prison for committing 35 sexual abuse crimes and 13 other crimes of corruption of minors. His residence was thoroughly searched, but no evidence was found linking him to Jeremy's disappearance. Almost coinciding with the 6th anniversary of the tragedy, Jeremy's family offered a generous reward to anyone who could help locate him. In 2013, the Civil Guard announced that they were investigating 3 Scottish pedophiles, 2 of whom were already imprisoned in their country. It was thought that they might have some connection to the boy's disappearance since all 3 were in Gran Canaria when the events occurred. Investigation sources reported that several agents had traveled to Scotland to take statements from the suspects, but the men remained silent, resulting in another dead end. In 2014, the then Minister of the Interior announced that there were quite promising new lines of investigation in relation to this case. However, no results were seen. In 2015, the discovery of a skull in the municipality revived hope of at least having closure. But this possibility was again frustrated when it was verified that the skull did not belong to Jeremy. In May 2016, the case attracted attention again, but not due to new leads. Instead, It was because of cross-accusations between Jeremy's stepfather and two young people from Mercia and their parents. Jonathan accused the four of spreading harmful comments about the missing child on social networks, while the Mercia family accused him of threatening them. On June 1, 2016, the Civil Guard found evidence to investigate Antonio Ojeda, better known as El Rubio, a 56-year-old man and former resident of the neighborhood. The subject in question had been in prison since 2015 for abusing a boy he approached while playing in the street. The events occurred in 2012. Antonio confessed to a cellmate that a neighbor had ended Jeremy's life and burned his body. According to his story, they had drugged him with a solvent on the day of his disappearance to prevent him from raising his hand. Given that Jeremy suffered from pulmonary insufficiency, it is likely that the blue color Antonio referred to was related to cyanosis, which causes this skin coloration during episodes of stress, such as the one the boy was presumably subjected to by his kidnappers. The detail of the child's respiratory problem was only known to the authorities and the family. How could Antonio know that the boy would turn blue? Because of this, he was at the center of the Civil Guard's investigation into Jeremy's disappearance. Antonio refused to testify or provide DNA samples. However, the court, which had been handling the case since the day the young boy disappeared, decided in 2017 to provisionally dismiss the case, concluding that there was no evidence against Antonio or any other person. This decision was confirmed by the Provincial Court of Las Palmas a year later, leading to the closure of the proceedings against the pedophile, who was released in March 2020 after serving a sentence for sexually assaulting another child in 2012. Jeremy's family, who have never stopped fighting to keep the investigation open and prevent the case from being forgotten, requested the reopening of the case. They argued that the presenting judge had not given due weight to evidence that the family considered very important. All this evidence pointed to the only suspect at the time, Antonio. In their request to reopen the case, the family mentioned that the judge had also dismissed another piece of evidence provided by the testimony of Pedro, who was 11 years old at the time of the events. He stated that he had seen a white Renault at the scene of the disappearance. In 2015, during a conversation with the prosecution's lawyers, Pedro, who was approaching 20 years old, clarified that it was indeed a white Renault, the same model owned by Antonio, but that he had initially confused the vehicle due to similarities in the rear design. The family also requested that multiple statements placing Antonio as a regular and daily customer of a bar located near the place of Jeremy's disappearance be taken into account. In fact, it was possible to see the vacant lot from the bar's entrance. In 2021, on the 14th anniversary of Jeremy's disappearance, the family's hopes were focused on the potential reopening of the case after all their efforts to achieve it. However, the moment was overshadowed when, on August 30th, 2021, in the early morning hours, Jeremy's father, Gonfra, was arrested by the National Police on suspicion of sexually assaulting his own 13-year-old daughter, born from a relationship that began after Jeremy's birth and disappearance. Juanfra was brought before a judge on the morning of August 31st, 2021, resulting in his provisional release with a restraining order while the investigation continued. On September 2nd, 2021, the court ordered the reopening of the case regarding Jeremy's disappearance. For the family, this was a significant step forward, as it allowed them to continue their fight to determine responsibility and see the perpetrator brought to justice. However, just 2 days after his provisional release, on September 2nd, 2021, Juanfra once again devastated the family of his first son. He was accused of sexually assaulting another teenager, as reported by reputable Spanish media outlets. The victim was the daughter of one of Juanfra's ex-partners, and like the first alleged victim, she was also 13 years old. Police sources confirmed that she was encouraged to report the incident after the alleged assault on Juanfra's daughter became known. On September 3rd, 2021, the court granted Juanfra, 37, provisional release with precautionary measures while the accusations against him were investigated. However, sources from the Superior Court of Justice of the Canary Islands explained that his release conditions could change during the investigation. Juanfra refused to testify in both cases and was prohibited from approaching or communicating with the complainant. He was also banned from leaving the island, had his passport confiscated, and was required to appear before the court every Monday. Determining what kind of person Juanfra is important for this case, because his behavior could have influenced his son's fate. While under investigation for the 2 alleged cases of sexual abuse against his daughter and his stepdaughter, Juan Fra made headlines again just a year later. Jeremy's father was arrested in 2022 after his partner reported him for alleged domestic violence. The woman had previously reported him for abuse earlier that year, and although he was summoned to trial in February, the woman withdrew the complaint before the trial, resulting in the case being closed. She later told the civil guard that she had withdrawn the charges under coercion from Juanfra. She returned to him, but far from stopping his violent behavior, the abuse continued for 6 months, leading her to file a new complaint. Juanfra, who, as mentioned earlier, fathered 7 children with 6 women, had been under suspicion for 15 years. On the day of Jeremy's disappearance, he had a solid alibi, as he was seen in the other side of the city, and even the civil guard had intercepted him at a traffic stop. However, there was always speculation that the boy's abduction could be related to a revenge or debt incurred by Humphrey related to drug trafficking. Jeremy Vargas's father, who comes from a humble family and has worked in the hospitality sector since a young age, has not provided financial support for any of his children and has not taken on the responsibilities that are his to bear. A neighbor from the area who has known him since childhood told the media that Juanfra has always been very successful with women, but he fathers a child, gets bored, and leaves them. She described him as a man incapable of commitment. However, this absent father who was on a very wrong path could have been the cause of Jeremy's disappearance, but there is nothing to prove it. What is certain is that the investigation into the disappearance of the 7-year-old boy remains open, and the reality is that news about his case is currently linked to scandals involving his parents, not to police updates on new findings or lines of investigation. In early 2023, the boy's mother, who continues to fight in search of answers, gave an interview. The interview went viral as the woman pointed out that to the pain of losing a child was added the suffering caused by having to deal with all kinds of attacks on social networks disguised as dark humor, which caused her a lot of harm. In the interview, she also reported receiving calls for a long time with all kinds of insults or pretending to be the civil guard with false leads about Jeremy's whereabouts. With the case reopened, a new opportunity is drawn to find Jeremy and try to figure out who kidnapped the boy. His mother has stated that she trusts the justice system and has begged the perpetrator to give Jeremy Vargas' remains back to the family. She indicated that if the boy was no longer alive, which would be very likely, she begged the kidnapper to give them the remains so they could give him a proper burial. The case of Benny Lynn Burke. In February 2021, a mysterious disappearance occurred in Dundee on the 250th birthday of single mother Benny Lynn Burke and her 2-year-old daughter, Jellica. What really happened to them? Let's explore this case and learn about one of the most disturbing events in Scottish history. Dundee is a vibrant city, home to around 45,000 people. Benny Lynn fell in love with the UK, where her child, Jellica, was born. She was born in November 1995 in the Philippines and had an older brother and sister. Growing up, Benny Lynn was an ambitious person. She worked and studied hard, focusing on getting her dream degree while contemplating her future. In 2015, her life took an unexpected turn when she met Lexington Burke online, a wealthy landlord from the UK who was almost 40 years her senior. Despite the significant age gap, they fell in love and decided to have a child. A month after their wedding on the island of Samar in the Philippines, their daughter, Jellica, was born. Unfortunately, their happiness did not last long. In 2019, after moving to the UK, their marriage began to fall apart and eventually ended in divorce. Benny Lynn became a single mother living 3 miles from Bristol in Kingswood. She found a place to live, and her family began a new chapter. For the first time, Benny Lynn felt a sense of freedom. She joined a Facebook group for mothers and began to connect with them. One member, Vicky Whip, offered support and complimented Benny Lynn, calling her a very kind and pleasant person. Her daughter, Jellica, developed normally, curious and confident in exploring her surroundings. For several months, Benny Lynn worked at a nursing home while also selling car vacuum cleaners online, sending part of her income to her family in the Philippines. Life was stable and peaceful with no signs of impending problems. In 2021, Benny Lynn and her daughter were living abroad, and she missed her parents terribly, calling and texting them every day. Feeling lonely, Benny Lynn frequently visited the dating site Filipino Cupid. One day, she started chatting with Andrew Innes, a 52-year-old man. They quickly connected and decided to meet in person. Benny Lynn accepted his invitation to his home in Dundee as she was curious to learn more about Scotland. Andrew wanted to help Benny Lynn find a job as a public relations manager that paid $1,000 a month, but Benny Lynn preferred her current job. Andrew was a kind and caring person, which made him the type of person Benny Lynn wanted to connect with to find happiness again. Her sister, Sheila Aquino, supported her decision. On February 17, 2021, Benny Lynn picked up Jellica and drove to Scotland for a weekend with Andrew. During the trip, she video chatted with her sister. Jellica packed very little because she planned to return home soon. Curious about the man who had captured her younger sister's heart, Sheila asked for an introduction. Without hesitation, Benny Lynn introduced them, and Sheila observed Andrew's tall figure and bald head with interest. On February 18th, Benny Lynn spent the day exploring the city of Dundee. She visited impressive museums, enjoyed local parks, and toured popular tourist attractions. While sightseeing, she called her sister, Sheila, to share these experiences. Benny Lynn showed Sheila Andrew's house, and they admired the white structure. Little did they know this would be their last conversation. The next morning, Sheila texted Benny Lynn but received no reply. 2 days later, she still hadn't heard back. Finally, on February 21st, Andrew contacted Sheila and informed her that Benny Lynn and her daughter had gone to Glasgow with a man she had met online. This news did little to ease Sheila's anxiety. She was doing her best to understand the situation. Was Benny Lynn really safe? Why hadn't Benny Lynn contacted her? Andrew reassured Sheila that Benny Lynn would get in touch later, but it was unusual for Benny Lynn to remain silent for so long. This worried Sheila. All she wanted to know was whether Benny Lynn was alive. Andrew insisted that Benny Lynn was fine and claimed she had met a good man. Sheila felt confused after her conversation with Andrew. It seemed he wanted to hastily end the discussion. He mentioned wanting to terminate his relationship with Benny Lynn and asserted that he would delete all records of their contact, claiming it was essential for their safety. On March 1st, Benny Lynn was scheduled to take her daughter, Jellica, to a routine pediatrician's appointment, but the appointment never took place. Concern turned to panic when they learned that Benny Lynn and Jellica had last been seen on February 18th. Doug, the family urgently reported their disappearance to the police, who were extremely worried. Benny Lynn's brother even dreamed of blurry images of his sister and her daughter, heightening the family's fears. Meanwhile, the police received information that Benny Lynn had been in Dundee the previous week. After conducting an investigation, they identified a man named Andrew Innes. When the police knocked on Andrew's door and asked about the whereabouts of Benny Lynn and her daughter, Jellica, Andrew replied that they were in Glasgow. What surprised the police was his refusal to let them in, citing that his daughter had just finished bathing. The officers caught a glimpse of the neatly dressed girl inside and insisted on entering the house. What they discovered was chaos. The kitchen was a mess, with pots and pans strewn across the stairs. The officers inquired again about Benny Lynn's whereabouts, and in a shocking revelation, Andrew admitted that he had killed her and hidden her under the floorboards. Let's take a closer look at Andrew's life. He was born in June 1970 and initially attended Alva Academy. He later moved to the University of Aberdeen and pursued a career in the video game industry. Andrew married a Japanese woman, and they had children together. The family eventually moved to Japan, but their marriage ended in 2019. After the divorce, Andrew was deported back to the UK, which profoundly affected him. He stopped meeting women in person and instead created several profiles on dating sites to search for potential partners. Police discovered his profiles on only 4 dating sites, including Filipino Cupid. It was on this site that he began communicating with Benny Lynn and quickly became the prime suspect in the murders of her and her daughter. Andrew's dark secrets were uncovered when police examined his laptop and found a well-organized spreadsheet of documents and data that he had collected from dating sites. The spreadsheet provided insight into his thought processes and included details about the women he interacted with online. Each entry was rated based on criteria such as age, height, weight, and whether they had children. He was particularly fond of women in their 20s and 30s with young children. Andrew told police that his argument with Benny Lynn turned violent, leading to her death. He initially denied any involvement in her death, but later confessed. Police quickly arrested Andrew. On March 5, 2021, he was taken to the police station, where he claimed that he had buried Benny Lynn and her daughter in the kitchen under a thick layer of concrete. Andrew's house was then searched. Under the kitchen floor, they found a large black garbage bag, just the right size to conceal an adult body. Nearby, there was a smaller bag. The findings shocked everyone in the house. Andrew had not only killed Benny Lynn and her child, but also hidden their bodies beneath his kitchen floor. The events that unfolded shocked the community, leaving many confused and asking the same questions. Forensic experts stated that Benny Lynn's DNA was found on a sledgehammer left at the scene, confirming it as the murder weapon. An autopsy revealed that Benny Lynn suffered chest injuries and severe head injuries. Jellica's autopsy determined that she had been suffocated and had significant pressure marks on her neck and around her mouth. Sheila had received a missed call from her sister's ex-husband, Lexington Burke, who informed her of the deaths of Benny Lynn and her daughter. Sheila was shocked to hear this information. When she regained her composure, she broke the heartbreaking news to her parents, who lived far away and were unaware of the situation. Benny Lynn's family had hoped that her move abroad would bring happiness and the fulfillment of her dreams. Unfortunately, for Benny Lynn and her daughter, their experience in a foreign country turned into a terrible nightmare. Her father wondered why his kind-hearted daughter had met such a tragic fate. In the weeks following the death of her loved ones, Sheila struggled to come to terms with the loss. She often had trouble sleeping and even reached out to Benny Lynn via text message, hoping to get a response. She expressed that joy had left their family after the deaths of Benny Lynn and Jellica and insisted that Andrew be held accountable for his actions. Soon after the tragedy, Benny Lynn's family faced another hardship. On June 7, 2021, a fire destroyed their home in the Philippines, leaving them homeless. This tragedy occurred just days before Benny Lynn and Jellica's ashes were to be returned to them. The family has struggled to cope with their loss, and Father Benny Lynn mentioned that they are currently relying on the kindness of local residents. When police reviewed the initial online conversations between Andrew and Benny Lynn, they discovered that he had asked her for private photos, but she had refused. Despite this, their relationship continued, and they made plans to meet. When police examined Andrew's search history, they found that 3 days before meeting Benny Lynn, he had searched for information about the use and storage of weapons. Andrew then invited Benny Lynn to his home. During questioning, Andrew recounted the events that occurred between February 20th and March 5th. He mentioned that he had purchased a hammer when he stopped to get gas. On that fateful morning, when he returned home, Andrew found Benny Lynn in the kitchen where she was preparing dinner. He explained that Benny Lynn resembled his ex-wife who was now living in Japan. This resemblance triggered memories of how his wife had treated him unfairly, causing his anger to rise. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, Andrew resorted to violence. He first picked up a hammer to attack Benny Lynn but quickly realized that it was ineffective. Remembering a samurai sword he had always admired, he decided to use it instead. During questioning, he claimed that Benny Lynn had taken his hammer and chased him for a while. Their struggle moved from the kitchen to the living room, where Benny Lynn was eventually attacked with both a sword and a knife. During questioning, Andrew explained that after several days without Benny Lynn, Jellica began crying for her mother. He was unable to calm the crying child and did not want to care for her, which led him to kill her and hide her body alongside Benny Lynn's. To conceal the crime, he placed the bodies in plastic bin bags, wrapped their heads in blankets and tarpaulins, and buried them under the kitchen floor. On February 2, 2023, 2 years after the murder, Andrew Innes was remanded in custody as the trial began at a high court in Edinburgh. Benny Lynn's family had traveled from the Philippines to attend. Andrew Innes admitted to causing the deaths of Benny Lynn Burke and her daughter, Jellica, at his home in Dundee, but denied intentionally killing them. The chief inspector described Andrew as cold and callous, stressing that he showed no remorse for his actions. After being questioned by the inspector, Andrew appeared very distressed and began to cry. He claimed that a fight had broken out that day and that he had acted in self-defense, leading to Benny Lynn's death. He insisted that he had not started the fight and that during the struggle, Benny Lynn had picked up a sushi knife and attacked him. He claimed that if he had planned the act in advance, he would have done it more tactfully and discreetly. On the third day of the trial, Andrew took the stand but gave inconsistent testimony. During cross-examination by the defense attorney, he was asked why he killed Benny Lynn. He claimed that he was insane due to steroid use. As the trial progressed, more shocking details came to light. The courtroom eagerly awaited the forensic expert's testimony, hoping for new revelations. It was revealed that DNA belonging to Benny Lynn was found on Andrew's clothing, and a condom containing DNA from both Andrew and Benny Lynn was found in the trash. A girl then testified about her daily experiences in Andrew's home, describing the use of handcuffs. She alleged that Andrew even paid her after committing his despicable act. Unfortunately, her identity and how she arrived at Andrew's home remain unclear. On February 6, 2023, the judge sought evidence from the defense regarding the psychosis Andrew claimed to have, but found none. The jury quickly returned a verdict. Andrew Innes was convicted of double murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 36 years. Although justice had been served, the horrific nature of the crime would haunt people's memories for a long time. The case of Carrie Nelson. On December 13, 1980, Carrie Nelson, a resident of the small American town of Luverne, Minnesota, was born to loving parents, had a younger sister and many friends. She was a sensitive and kind girl, always trying to help her loved ones and very empathetic towards others' problems. After graduating from her local high school, Carrie attended college in the neighboring state of North Dakota. Her dream was to become a doctor to help people. It was there that she met a boy named Mike Kellen, and after some time, the couple got engaged. Carrie balanced her university studies with a part-time job at Blue Mound State Park, close to her hometown. Her duties included selling tickets for the park and guiding guests who came for camping, hiking, or wildlife viewing. Carrie had been working there for her second consecutive season and was passionate about the place. The job was straightforward, and it also allowed her to spend a lot of time in nature, enjoying the picturesque landscapes. On May 20th, 2001, Carrie went to work as usual. That day, only one other girl named Rebecca, who was an intern, was working at the park. In addition to her primary responsibilities, Carrie was tasked with training Rebecca and familiarizing her with the workflow. Carrie's shift started at 8 a.m. and was supposed to end at 3:30 p.m. She spent most of the day with Rebecca, explaining the details of the job. Around 12:45 p.m., Rebecca went to the office building located at the other end of the park, while Carrie stayed in a small room at the entrance. Rebecca returned around 2:30 p.m., entering the building through the back door, where she discovered a horrifying scene. Carrie was lying on the floor motionless, with a pool of blood near her head. At approximately the same time, Rebecca heard the front door open, and fearing it could be the same person who attacked her colleague, ran out the back door and headed home. Rebecca lived in a house within the park because her father was the park manager, so she reached it quickly. She informed her parents about the incident, and her father rushed to the scene while her mother called the police. The father reached the building and found no one but Carrie. He tried to find her pulse and realized she was dead. After that, he closed the curtains, locked the front door, and called 911. Around the same time, another call was made to the police. It turned out that when Rebecca discovered her colleague's body, a park visitor had entered, not the attacker. The woman went to the reception area, saw Carrie's body next to the pool of blood, then returned to her car and also called 911. The police arrived at the scene and began their investigation. Carrie's body was found behind the counter, where the telephones and cash register were located, and there were scattered objects and papers around. The handset of one of the phones was dangling from the table, and the plastic pen from Carrie's chair was broken with its pieces scattered on the floor. Based on this, the police inferred that there had been a struggle between the victim and the attacker. After speaking with the administrators, the investigators learned that 2 bank bags intended for storing money from the building were missing. Moreover, the unknown thief had taken cash from the cash register, totaling approximately $2,000 in stolen money. On the floor, the detectives found several clues: a man's wristwatch with a broken strap and a pack of cigarettes. Considering that Carrie did not smoke, the police assumed the cigarettes were left by the killer. As for the watch, they speculated that Carrie might have torn it off the attacker's wrist during the struggle. They also found large orange stone particles on the floor. The park manager told investigators that these particles likely came from a decorative stone with the park's name on it that was located in the reception area. The officers searched all the rooms but could not find the suspect. Given that there was blood spatter on the walls and ceiling of the room, they assumed that this stone had been used as the murder weapon. Meanwhile, their colleagues blocked the road leading to the park's entrance and began questioning all visitors. A couple who was camping reported that around 2:30 p.m., a white car with a brown vinyl roof sped past them. Unfortunately, they could not recall the make or the license plate of the vehicle. The detectives' investigation was complicated by the absence of surveillance cameras in the park, as crimes were extremely rare there. The only clues available were a wristwatch, a pack of cigarettes, and the vague testimonies of witnesses. Medical examiners inspected the victim's body and concluded that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head with a heavy object. They suspected that the offender might have used a large decorative stone, but this theory could only be definitively confirmed after its discovery. According to the detectives, Carrie's attack took place between 2 o'clock and 2:30 p.m. at the young woman's workplace. They found a love letter she had written to her boyfriend. In it, Carrie expressed her eager anticipation for their wedding and her desire to have 2 children. She dated the letter at 2 p.m. Another interesting fact was that the man's watch found near the victim's body had stopped at 2:16 p.m., possibly because Carrie tore it from the wrist of her assailant. The police expanded the search throughout the park, and 5 days later, they found the decorative stone in a nearby stream. Apparently, the killer had taken it with them and thrown it into the stream from a bridge while driving. Medical experts compared the characteristics of the stone with the injuries to Carrie's head and confirmed it was the murder weapon. However, the water had washed away any fingerprints and DNA samples that the offender might have left behind. No further clues were found, and the police began to search for a potential suspect. They first suspected Carrie's boyfriend, but he had a solid alibi. At the time of the murder, he was at a funeral 110 kilometers away from the park. That day, around 3 p.m., he had tried to call Carrie on her work phone, not yet aware that his girlfriend had been killed. Investigating park employees, police learned that Carrie had been troubled by a 26-year-old coworker named Steven, who persistently asked her out and whose advances she had rejected. Steven, who also had a known drug habit and allegedly sold drugs to park visitors, became a person of interest. Steven's alibi for the day of the murder, he claimed to be at his daughter's birthday party, didn't account for the entire time frame of Carrie's death, raising suspicions. Steven owned a white Cadillac, aligning with the description of the vehicle seen speeding away from the park. Financial difficulties further suggested a motive for Steven's potential involvement in the theft and possibly the murder, especially if he had discovered Carrie's intentions to report his drug-related activities. His vehicle was impounded and a DNA sample was taken, but there was not enough evidence to conclusively link him to the crime. Despite collecting various DNA samples and fingerprints at the crime scene, none could be conclusively matched to Steven or any other suspects, leaving the case unresolved. The investigators continued to pursue all leads, but with limited evidence and no further clues, the case went cold. At that time, DNA analysis technology had significantly advanced, allowing experts to re-examine the evidence. This time, they identified 3 distinct DNA profiles, one belonging to Carrie, another to an unknown male, and a third to an unknown female. These samples were run through the state database, but no matches were found. However, detectives remembered a significant detail. The pack of cigarettes found near Carrie's body had a unique tax stamp indicating that it was purchased in South Dakota. They sent the DNA samples to their South Dakota counterparts and eventually made a breakthrough. Upon checking the South Dakota database, they found a match for the male DNA profile. The individual identified was Randy Swaney, a 35-year-old with a criminal record for serial theft and who was, at the time, serving a 30-month sentence in a South Dakota prison. At the time of the murder, he had been out of jail. Police also found that he owned a light-colored Oldsmobile Delta, which matched the description given by witnesses. His fingerprints were found to match several prints at the crime scene. Despite this evidence, detectives aimed to gather as much proof as possible before charging him. With only a month left in his prison term, the police moved quickly, fearing he might flee upon release. They interviewed his wife, who was accustomed to her husband being under police scrutiny for thefts, but was shocked to hear about the murder suspicion. When shown a photo of the wristwatch found at the scene, she confirmed it belonged to Randy and said he sometimes wore it, leading investigators to believe the last DNA sample on the watch was his. They then informed her of their suspicion that her husband was involved in the murder. On April 19th, detectives went to the prison to talk to Randy, but he declined to speak without a lawyer. After a failed interrogation attempt, Randy called his wife. The police who recorded jail calls overheard her upset and questioning what he had done. She was mainly concerned about her DNA being found on the wristwatch and fearful of being implicated in the crime. The wife cooperated with the police, providing her DNA sample, allowing them to search her home and handing over photos of Randy. One photo showed him at the wheel of a white car, similar to the one described by witnesses. Another showed him wearing a wristwatch with a broken strap like the one found at the crime scene. She also confirmed that Randy smoked the same brand of cigarettes found near Carrie's body. All this evidence was sufficient to take the case to trial. Randy was charged on May 8, 2007, a day before his scheduled release. He was immediately transferred to a Minnesota jail and the prosecution began preparing for trial. According to the prosecution's theory, Randy had initially targeted the Park building as an easy robbery site due to the lack of cameras and security, but also the presence of cash. When he entered the building, Carrie may have been in another room. But as she returned and discovered the intrusion, Randy began to steal money from the cash register. She caught him in the act, which led to a struggle between them. Randy then threatened her to open the safe. After accessing the safe, he took a decorative stone and struck her over 5 times, fearing leaving a live witness. Even his relatives, including his wife, testified against him during the trial. They revealed that Randy regularly committed theft, abused illegal substances, and had serious gambling debts, constantly leading him into debt. His former cellmate recounted how Randy mentioned leaving his watch at the crime scene. Another inmate testified that after the police interviewed him in jail, Randy said, "This time they've caught me. I'm looking at life in prison." Randy's defense lawyers maintained his innocence, arguing that he had lost his watch prior to the incident and that the real killer had found and used it. However, this claim was in direct conflict with the DNA evidence found on the watch, which included genetic material from Randy, his wife, and Carrie. The accused claimed he had been fishing about 150 kilometers from the park on the day of the incident, but since he was supposedly alone, no one could corroborate his alibi. He also claimed that he had been in the park only once, long before the murder, which is when he acknowledged he might have left his fingerprints. However, all of the defense's arguments were outweighed by the solid evidence. The defense attorney tried to cast suspicion on others, including Carrie's boyfriend, insinuating he could be the real killer, but these suggestions did not align with the facts. The trial concluded on August 15, 2008. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury found Randy guilty. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Despite this, he continued to assert his innocence and filed several appeals, all of which were denied. From the start, his defense relied on far-fetched theories that contradicted the DNA evidence and other substantial proof, leaving no chance for his case to be reconsidered. The case of Jennifer Kessie. Jennifer was an American woman from Orlando, Florida. She attended the University of Central Florida in Orlando, graduating in February 2003 with a degree in finance. In February 2006, 24-year-old, she seemed to have everything going for her. She had a thriving personal life, was excelling at work. She currently works as a financial manager at Central Florida Investments timeshare company in Ocoee and recently purchased a condo in Orlando. According to her best friend, Jennifer was always cautious about her safety and carried pepper spray with her at all times. On Sunday, January 22, 2006, Jennifer returned from a vacation with her boyfriend, Rob Allen. They had been dating for about a year. Since Rob lived approximately 3 hours away from Jennifer's apartment in Orlando, they could only see each other on weekends. On Monday, January 23rd, Jennifer returned to work after her vacation. That day, she called her mother, Joyce Kessie, to talk about her trip. Joyce later said Jennifer sounded happy and refreshed during the call. After work, Jennifer went home and called her boyfriend around 10 p.m. The conversation did not go well. Jennifer felt upset, as she believed Rob didn't love her enough. She was frustrated that they lived far apart and could only see each other on weekends. She told him that this arrangement wasn't enough for her. The two argued and the call ended on a bad note. Rob could not have imagined that this would be their final conversation. The next morning after Rob called her early in the morning as usual, his call went straight to her voicemail. Jennifer didn't show up to work and stopped answering her phone, which was highly unusual. Concerned, her co-workers contacted her parents, who immediately became alarmed. On their way to Jennifer's apartment, her parents called local hospitals and reported her disappearance to the police. When Jennifer's parents arrived at her apartment, everything appeared normal. The apartment manager used a spare key to unlock the door, and they found her suitcase in a clean and tidy living space, as if a maid had just cleaned it. However, the bathroom was noticeably disorganized. Jennifer's mother explained that Jennifer often rushed out in the mornings, leaving the bathroom messy. Inside, they found scattered cosmetics, curling iron clamps, a wet crumpled towel, and water droplets everywhere. Jennifer's bedtime t-shirt was on the floor, all suggesting she had spent the night there. Strangely, her purse, keys, and cell phone were missing. It seemed evident that Jennifer had stayed at home the night before, woke up, started her usual morning routine, left the apartment, locked the door, and then disappeared. Jennifer's brother, Logan Kess, began questioning nearby construction workers to find out if they had seen Jennifer or noticed anything suspicious that morning. However, the workers refused to cooperate or share any information, which fueled Logan's suspicion that they might know something but were unwilling to speak. The Kessie family grew increasingly frustrated with the police, who initially showed little urgency. Authorities believe Jennifer might have had an argument with her boyfriend and left on her own, expecting her to return soon. Later that evening, when Jennifer still hadn't returned, the police officially declared her missing. Although evidence showed she had been in her apartment that morning, authorities initially speculated she might have been abducted the previous night. Based on cell tower data, they concluded she wasn't at home that night. However, her parents strongly disagreed, maintaining that she had stayed in her apartment overnight. Further analysis later confirmed that the initial interpretation of the cell data was incorrect. Jennifer had, in fact, spent the night in her apartment. Rob was questioned by investigators, and he provided a clear alibi, proving that he had nothing to do with his lover's death. Jennifer's family and friends immediately organized efforts to find her, distributing flyers with her photo and appeals for help throughout Orlando. Hundreds of people joined the search. However, as the hours turned into days, hope of finding Jennifer alive began to fade. The police struggled to find leads, and while various theories were proposed, nothing concrete emerged. Witnesses reported seeing Jennifer's car leaving her apartment complex around 7:40 a.m. on the morning she disappeared. However, they couldn't identify who was driving or which direction the car went. 2 days after Jennifer went missing, a tip came into the sheriff's office. Jennifer's car was found abandoned at the apartment complex. Located nearly 2 kilometers from her own apartment, Jennifer had no known ties to this area, and her family stated that she had never been there before. When police found the car, they asked Rob to inspect it with them, as they were particularly interested in his reaction. Initially, police feared they might find Jennifer's body, but they found no signs of a struggle or foul play. The car appeared normal. Inside, they discovered Jennifer's cell phone, charger, sandals, and shoes, nothing out of place. Despite continued investigations, no additional evidence was found. The mystery of Jennifer Kessie's disappearance persisted, leaving her family and friends in anguish, desperate for answers they might never fully receive. Was it a robbery or a car theft? Witnesses might have seen who was inside the car, but none could be located. However, police soon discovered crucial evidence when reviewing surveillance footage in the area where the car was found. Around noon on the day Jennifer disappeared, a camera recorded someone driving her car. The person briefly parked near the pool area, reversed, sat in the car for 32 seconds, then got out and walked away without looking back. The surveillance camera captured images every 3 seconds, but the individual's face was obscured each time by a fence post. As a result, their identity could not be determined. Based on the person's walk, police concluded it was a man about 1.65 meters tall, dressed like a construction worker. Detectives distributed the photo, hoping someone might recognize the man from his walk, height, or general appearance, but no leads emerged. At the time, renovations were underway at Jennifer's apartment complex. She had told her parents that construction workers would stop what they were doing and stare at her whenever she walked by. The workers frequently changed, and many were reportedly undocumented. Possibly because of this, they were uncooperative with the investigation and avoided speaking to the police. Due to language barriers, investigators were unable to question these individuals, and no additional evidence linking them to the case was discovered. There were no surveillance cameras in Jennifer's apartment building, and security relied only on a guard logging visitors' names. However, police found that the visitor log had been left blank. In addition, investigators failed to thoroughly search Jennifer's apartment. No security measures were implemented to protect her home, which allowed around 14 people to enter the apartment before the investigation moved forward. This mismanagement significantly harmed the case. Police were also unable to recover fingerprints from the steering wheel or rearview mirror of Jennifer's car. It is uncertain whether these areas were wiped clean during the brief period when the car was parked. No traces of DNA were found in the vehicle either. Overall, the investigators' efforts were poorly executed, causing the case to stall. By February 2008, on the second anniversary of Jennifer's disappearance, her family and friends gathered in Orlando, holding posters with her image in hopes that someone might recognize her. In February 2009, a detective revisited the case with a fresh perspective. He tried to talk to a maid who had worked at Jennifer's apartment complex since February 2006. The woman said she remembered the young woman's disappearance. When detectives showed her the surveillance photo of the person seen driving Jennifer's car, the maid commented that he looked like a man she had seen before. She wasn't entirely sure, but the man's walk and hairstyle reminded her of him. The detective discovered that the man had previously lived and worked at Jennifer's apartment complex. He had performed maintenance work in Jennifer's apartment just a week before she disappeared. Tracking the man down was easy. He was serving time in a Florida prison for assaulting a young woman, a crime committed 2 years after Jennifer's disappearance. The detective met with him and questioned him about his work in Jennifer's apartment. He admitted to performing maintenance there and claimed that Jennifer had let him in before leaving for work. When shown the surveillance photo of a person resembling him, the man denied it was him, pointing out that the individual appeared to be about 10 centimeters shorter than he is. He was cooperative and denied any involvement. He agreed to take a polygraph test, which he passed. The detective then interviewed another worker who had assisted the man with repairs at Jennifer's apartment. The co-worker confirmed they had worked there and stated that everything had gone smoothly. The detective also spoke to the apartment complex manager to check if Jennifer had experienced any conflicts with the man or others. The manager reported that they had noticed no issues. In 2010, this detective was removed from Jennifer's case. Over time, the Kess family began to feel that the Orlando Police Department had abandoned them. But the police insisted the investigation was still active. In reality, the case had been largely neglected. In 2016, a decade after Jennifer's disappearance, she was officially declared dead in Florida. 2 years later, in December 2018, Her parents Joyce and Drew Kessie filed a lawsuit against the Orlando Police Department to gain access to police records from the case. The lawsuit was settled in March 2019. The Orlando police chief gave investigators 6 months to review the case, but when no new leads emerged, he made a pivotal decision. In an unprecedented move, the police department handed over all case materials to the Kess family. Jennifer's parents received more than 16,000 pages of documents and 67 hours of video and audio recordings. By mutual agreement, the official investigation was closed. The Kessie family then hired private detective to review the case. After examining the files 3 times, the detective expressed shock at the many critical mistakes and oversights made by the Orlando police. The detective began by revisiting the crime scene and speaking with residents of Jennifer's apartment complex. One neighbor had lived there for 2 years before Jennifer disappeared, shared her concerns. She initially appreciated the gated complex with security, but grew uneasy when construction workers began occupying empty apartments. She explained, "When I came home from work, there would be a group of drunk men outside. They would yell unpleasant things or stare at me inappropriately as I walked by. It made me very uncomfortable." Despite complaining to the building management, no action was taken. Another neighbor described even more troubling experiences. She revealed that construction workers had entered her apartment while she was away. She noticed unsettling signs, such as her underwear drawer being opened, evidence of someone using her shower, and footprints in her closet. She also recalled a disturbing incident where she caught one of the workers watching her through a window while engaging in indecent behavior. She reported the incident to the police, but the man was never held accountable. He was merely fired and disappeared. A third neighbor revealed that a construction worker had approached her in the parking lot at night, attempting to start conversations and coming across as overly pushy. She said she encountered him several times a week. In contrast, a fourth neighbor had a more positive impression of the same worker. She said, "I remember him as cheerful, friendly, and talkative." She moved into the complex shortly after Jennifer's disappearance and recalled that this worker frequently visited her apartment. However, Jennifer's name was never mentioned in their conversations. What unsettled this neighbor was that, 9 months after Jennifer vanished, the worker suddenly left the complex overnight and disappeared. The man was found through descriptions from neighbors and passed a polygraph test. At this time, when the investigation progressed, the detective uncovered a potential lead. 10 months after Jennifer vanished, a witness reported seeing someone throw a rolled-up carpet into a lake near her apartment complex. At the time, construction workers living in an apartment across from Jennifer's were seen moving carpets, raising suspicions that Jennifer's body might have been hidden in one of the carpets and discarded in the lake. In November 2019, 12 years after Jennifer's disappearance, local police, along with a team of divers, searched the lake where the carpet was reportedly dumped. Despite searching for 2 days, no evidence was found. It has now been 13 years since Jennifer Kessie vanished. After investigating the case for several years, private detective proposed a new theory about her disappearance. Based on interviews with residents of Jennifer's apartment complex, he discovered that approximately 10 construction workers had been living in an empty apartment directly across from Jennifer's unit. He speculated that on the morning of January 24, 2006, as Jennifer was leaving her apartment and locking her door, some of these workers attacked her from behind and dragged her into the vacant apartment. Unfortunately, identifying these individuals has proven impossible, as there are no records or contracts documenting their names. Jennifer's parents have dedicated their lives to finding her. Despite investing significant time and money, they have not yet succeeded. Jennifer's mother expressed the pain of their ongoing search, saying, "It's very, very hard to move forward. The hole in our hearts will remain until we have answers." Jennifer's boyfriend, Rob Allen, also shared that he frequently thinks of her and imagines the life they might have had together if not for this tragedy. The Jennifer Kessie case remains one of the most mysterious and heartbreaking missing persons cases, enduring for more than 18 years without clear answers. The Kess family continues to seek justice and holds hope that one day, new clues will emerge to help solve the case. The Kess family remains hopeful for Jennifer's return. They are offering a $15,000 reward for any information that could lead to her whereabouts. Despite extensive investigations and search efforts, Jennifer's whereabouts remain unknown to this day. This case serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of sustaining public interest and support in the pursuit of justice for missing persons. Sarah Nicole Graham, born on April 1, 1996, in the United States, remains a subject shrouded in mystery as specific details of her birth and early life remain undisclosed. Sarah's upbringing was under the care of her mother in Texas, sharing a joyful childhood with her brother, though their names are absent in the records detailing Sarah's life. Described as a sweet, responsible, and initially shy girl when meeting new individuals, Sarah's spontaneous and lively nature would shine through once she became comfortable. From the information gathered, we learned about her father, Hubert Graham, a direct descendant of the indigenous people of America. This lineage connected Sarah to the Lumbee tribe, predominantly situated in the counties of Robeson, Hook, and Scotland in North Carolina. The Lumbee tribe emerged from the remnants of extinct tribes, grouping in a recognized area since 1956 when Congress passed the Lumbee Act, officially recognizing them as Native Americans. However, the act also withheld federal recognition benefits, denying them sovereignty, land rights, and other advantages afforded to different tribes. Despite generations of fighting against this discrimination, they remain without a reservation, though they do congregate in a specific area. Located in Robeson County, North Carolina, serves as the cultural, economic, and political hub for the Lumbee tribe. Sarah journeyed there in 2014 after finishing high school, possibly aiming to connect with her genealogical roots. At 18, she aspired to relocate to Fairmont, a quaint rural town north of the North Carolina-South Carolina border, to live with her father, Hubert, her stepmother, Connie Graham, and a stepbrother, though details about him remain elusive. By then, Hubert and Connie held positions as assistants to the sheriff of the county, earning them respect within the community. While little is publicly known about Sarah's relationship with her father and stepmother, all signs pointed to her enjoying the newfound connection with her ancestral culture, having grown up in a different state. Upon settling in Fairmont, Sarah eagerly sought employment, quickly landing a job as a receptionist and cashier at Walmart in Pembroke. Her excellent communication skills and friendly demeanor quickly made her an indispensable team member. Sarah was a responsible and kind-hearted young woman, popular among her colleagues, and was beginning to form friendships. In just 2 months of reconnecting with her ethnic roots, Sarah was thriving and genuinely happy. However, on the morning of Wednesday, February 4, 2015, something changed. Although she woke up early and prepared for her 7 a.m. work shift at Walmart, she never arrived. Her supervisor immediately noticed her absence, given her previously consistent punctuality and commitment. That very day, the white Chevrolet van, loaned to her by her father and under his name, was found abandoned. At around 12:15 p.m., police received reports of the seemingly deserted vehicle located several meters from the road near a cornfield, marking the beginning of a concerning mystery. When the officers approached the area, they were able to confirm that it was indeed the van Sarah usually drove. It was already quite strange that it was parked there, seemingly abandoned and without the young girl in sight. The situation became even murkier when witnesses claimed they had seen the vehicle parked there since 6:45 a.m. This statement set off alarms, as it meant that the van had stopped there just 15 minutes after Sarah had left her house. It was a puzzle that no one could decipher at that moment. The officers inspected the vehicle and the surrounding area for any clues or traces that could guide the investigation into Sarah's whereabouts. However, the task proved difficult. There was no damage to the van, no signs of a struggle around it, and no tracks of shoe prints being dragged on the ground, which could have indicated an abduction. A mysterious aspect of the case revolved around the fact that the van was locked. Speculations were made that someone must have manually locked the door with the car key. However, many older vehicles, like the one Sarah was using, allow the driver to manually lock the doors and close them without using the key. In many cases, cars get locked by accident. With the discovery of the abandoned van, the Fairmont Police Department activated the missing person search protocol. Along with police officers, 140 local volunteers, and a canine unit participated. However, there were challenges, the first being that Robeson County is the largest in North Carolina, making the search extensive and primarily in a rural area. As a result, the search was not easy, and even a helicopter had to be used. Concurrently, the process of printing missing person flyers began. Sarah was described on the flyers as a Native American young woman, 5'7" tall, weighing 150 pounds, with short brown hair, wearing corrective glasses and braces. Robeson County has just over 100,000 permanent residents, though it is known to temporarily house many migrant workers. The area also has a rather negative reputation, being known for significant drug trafficking activity. This is due to its strategic location, situated halfway between Miami, Florida, and New York on Interstate 95, making it a popular stop for traffickers. Amidst this scenario, with many people coming and going without proper records or tracking, figuring out what happened to the young girl seemed like a Herculean task. Local and state officials joined the search, but without significant results. A month later, FBI agents joined the search, yet they too were unable to find any trace of Sarah. Her family had no contact with her, nor did they receive ransom demands or any communication from supposed kidnappers asking for favors in exchange for her safe return. The general consensus in the town was that she had vanished into thin air. On March 18th, 6 months after Sarah's disappearance, Connie, her stepmother, was dismissed from her position as an assistant at the sheriff's office. She had worked there for 23 years, and her sudden dismissal raised eyebrows and fueled suspicion and rumors. The sheriff announced the news but refused to provide further details, labeling it a personal decision. He also stated that the dismissal was not related to Sarah's disappearance, though this did little to quell public suspicions. In a statement, he also expressed understanding of the public's eagerness for information, but requested patience, stating that releasing specific case details could jeopardize the integrity of the investigation and hinder efforts to find Sarah. He assured that the Robeson County Sheriff's Office detectives, in collaboration with the FBI, were working tirelessly on the case and vowed not to stop until Sarah was found. After Connie's dismissal was made public, sources close to the investigation said that the FBI considered Connie a suspect in the case, adding that an arrest and charges could be forthcoming. Once this information was disseminated, all eyes turned to the Graham residence. However, as time passed, the hypothesis that the stepmother was involved in Sarah's disappearance was never proven. In fact, she was not arrested for questioning, nor were charges brought against her, and she was never named a person of interest. Despite this, public opinion on social media at the time and over the years has consistently suggested that she might be involved. While there hasn't been any official statement, rumors suggested that Connie's son and Sarah's stepbrother was a problematic boy and that he was responsible for the young girl's disappearance. The rumors spread on social media talked about a romantic interest ordering an obsession from the stepbrother, to which Sarah never responded. On the contrary, she seemed annoyed by his persistence. A year after Sarah's disappearance, there was very little information available about her case. It seemed as if the earth had swallowed her up. On the first anniversary, FBI agents and local officers conducted an operation where they distributed flyers with Sarah's details and images to drivers passing through the area where the teenager's van was found. At that time, the officers insisted that although they had little information about the young girl who had only been living in the place for 2 months when she disappeared, it was clear that her disappearance was not usual. They stated that she would not have left without notice, and if she had, she would have contacted her parents to at least inform them that she was well and in another place. In December 2018, human remains were found near the railroad tracks about 3 kilometers from the lumber bridge in Riley County. Later, it was determined that they belonged to a female, and immediately people thought it could be Sarah. On December 1338, it was announced that Sarah's dental records were sent to Riley County to see if there was a match with the young girl. A second set of dental records was sent to the office of the forensic chief medical officer in Riley. However, it was later confirmed that it was not Sarah. In 2022, the Federal Bureau of Investigation made another appeal asking for information to find the teenager, stating that although they had received hundreds of clues, they still needed that missing piece to bring Sarah home. The agent reminded that there is a $5,000 reward for information that leads to finding Sarah's whereabouts. After the video was published, the young girl's father broke the silence he had maintained for years. He expressed his feelings about how the agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, treated him in the case of his daughter Sarah's disappearance. At the time of his statement, he served as chief of the Roland Police Department and mentioned that despite holding that position, he needed to be treated as a father, as Sarah was still his daughter regardless of the circumstances. It is worth remembering that previously, Hubert had worked as a deputy sheriff of another county when his daughter disappeared, and this somehow led to him being viewed very critically and always being under suspicion. Hurt by the whole situation that kept him always in the public eye, despite there being no real evidence against him, Hubert said that over the years, the FBI had barely contacted him in relation to Sarah, and he recalled a call in which they asked him about his daughter's orthodontics due to the finding of some human remains, which ultimately turned out not to be Sarah's, but no one informed him of the results. He found out like any other citizen when the media published the outcome of the investigation of the female remains found near the train. The truth was, in the investigators' opinion, there was someone close to Sarah who was not revealing all the information they had, and this had given rise to numerous rumors and speculations about what had happened. Hubert expressed his deep concern about not knowing anything about his daughter's whereabouts after she came to live with him and his wife 2 months before disappearing. Despite the difficult situation, he maintained hope that Sarah was alive and stated that no one had provided him with solid evidence to indicate otherwise. He clarified that he was not an indifferent father to what had happened and offered his arguments for keeping a low profile. He said that although he had experience as a detective due to his 23 years in law enforcement, he preferred to stay away from the investigation to avoid any perception of influence or interference in the process. However, that didn't seem to work out quite well either, as he then received criticism for being lenient and not offering cooperation. He pointed out that his position was quite difficult, as whether he did or did not do something generated abundant criticism. To the father's statement, the FBI responded in a very institutional way. Through a public affairs specialist, they responded to Hubert's concerns about routine contact in relation to Sarah's case and explained that they had always spoken with the family when there were updates in the investigation, but they would not necessarily make a personal notification for already known information. Despite the pain and uncertainty, Sarah's father shared that there came a point where he had to surrender to God's will and not let worries dominate his life. He affirmed that ultimately God knew best and would handle the situation according to his will, regardless of what the final outcome was. On June 13, 2023, special agents and officers from Robeson County conducted a search at the Graham family's home, looking for new clues about Sarah's disappearance. The sheriff's office stated at that time that they were doubting the version given by the father and stepmother about the day the young girl was last seen. The statement from the sheriff's office indicated that they had not been able to independently confirm the family's version that Sarah left for work the day she disappeared, which occurred more than 8 years ago. Now, after such a long time has passed since her last sighting, Sarah's case is being reviewed again. In a Facebook post, the sheriff's office confirmed that homicide detectives, the FBI, and a tracker dog from the North Carolina Troopers Association had started a search, although no details were provided about the location where it was taking place. According to the authorities, Sarah is one of several Native American women who have disappeared in the same area in recent years. During the summer of 2017, it was reported that 3 women, 2 of them belonging to the North Carolina tribe, were found dead in the city of Lumberton in Robeson County. The cases have not been solved, which has raised fears of the existence of a possible serial killer, according to a news report. Despite this concerning situation, the sheriff's office did not mention any possible connection between these cases and Sarah's disappearance in their statement. The case of Sarah Nicole Graham remains a mystery, leaving her family and community seeking answers for over 8 years. Over time, authorities have conducted thorough investigations and searches, but to this date, there has been no significant breakthrough in the case of Sarah Nicole Graham. The lack of concrete information has led to various theories and speculation. While Sarah's family continues to wait anxiously, her family continues to cry out for justice and longs for the day her family continues to cry out for justice and longs for the day when the truth about her disappearance is unveiled. Meanwhile, The memory of Sarah endures in the minds of those who knew and loved her, and the hope of finding her alive persists. As the investigation continues, it is hoped that new leads and developments will shed light on this dark and painful episode, bringing the long-awaited peace and closure to her family and her community. The case of Jamie Haggard. David Haggard was born on February 23, 1974, in Woodinville, Washington, United States. He is the oldest son of Arthur Richard, an agricultural worker, and his biological mother is largely unknown. When he was 15, Arthur had 2 more children with another wife, daughters Stephanie and Jamie Haggard. Jamie, the youngest, was born on December 2, 1980, in King County, Washington. She was cherished and spoiled by her father, Arthur. He sought to fulfill her every wish from the moment she was born. Jamie and Stephanie grew up very close. They often dressed alike and did activities together, making them look like twin sisters due to their small age difference. Jamie loved spending holidays by the water, whether at the sea or a nearby lake, and frequently asked Arthur to take them to Poplavino when the opportunity arose. David's life as the oldest child was far from peaceful and happy, unlike his father's and younger sister's lives. He moved to California, where he had to adapt to a new family that he barely knew. Feeling lonely and lacking parental affection, he turned to illegal substances in his teenage years. This marked the beginning of his downward spiral. He started with minor offenses, but things escalated. One day, David took a car without the owner's permission and was arrested for theft. He was released afterward, but did not learn from this experience and continued to engage in criminal behavior. Soon after, he was arrested twice for possessing illegal substances. His last arrest in February 2005 resulted in a 2-year prison sentence, but he was paroled after a year due to his youth. The state decided to grant him a chance to clear his record on the condition that he remain offense-free for 5 years. If successful, he could have his 3 felony convictions in California erased, leaving him with a clean record. After all the incidents, he returned to Washington. Meanwhile, Jamie is entering her teenage years, and this has brought many changes for her. She became more independent and no longer looked up to her older sister Stephanie. She has big ambitions and sets high goals for the future. After graduating from high school, she dreamed of becoming a doctor. Ultimately, she chose to become a physician assistant. During this time, she met a young man named Jake, who came from Woodinville. They quickly became close, and their friendship gradually developed into love. In February 2008, at just 19 years old, Jamie gave birth to twin girls, whom she named Dylan and Madison Rose. However, Jake and Jamie's relationship faced many challenges, and they split up shortly after their daughters were born. Despite the breakup, they maintained a friendly relationship and communicated regularly for the sake of their daughters, sharing custody without any issues. Jamie also successfully completed his studies and got a steady job at a medical center. David still had trouble during this time. He started using illegal drugs again, and his behavior became erratic and aggressive. As a result, he was arrested for public disorder conduct. Fortunately for David, at his hearing, he reached a plea deal with the prosecutor. The court decided to defer his sentencing again and placed him on probation, requiring him to undergo regular alcohol testing. He attended an anger management workshop and pledged not to repeat his illegal behavior in the future. Since his sentence was suspended, but not vacated, this means his previous crimes will still be on his record. Meanwhile, Jamie began a new relationship. Although her family didn't know much about the man she was dating, she called him her fiancé. Unfortunately, the relationship didn't go as she had hoped, and the romantic phase ended, leaving Jamie feeling upset. Seeking support, she decided to move in with a friend, which meant her children, the twins, stayed with their father, Jake. However, Jamie still made an effort to spend as much time as possible with her children to make up for her absence. David continued to engage in illegal activities. In February 2016, he got into a fight with a friend over a car. Fueled by anger, he broke into his friend's house, where he stole several items, including a toaster and a refrigerator. Given his criminal background, he wanted to avoid being caught, so he set the house on fire. Initially, Investigators couldn't determine the cause of the fire, but they discovered a crowbar at the entrance, suggesting that someone had forcibly entered the home. A few months later in March, Jamie found a new place to live. She rented a house in Kenmare, a small town on the shore of North Lake Washington, just a 15-minute drive from Woodin Villa. David, who was homeless but still in touch with his family, approached Jamie. She kindly invited David, her half-brother, to stay with her for a few days. However, whether out of manipulation or convenience, David ended up moving in permanently. At first, his stay with she seemed to cause no inconvenience. Sharing the rent with him made her feel like she had gotten through a difficult period in her life. As time went on, the differences between Jamie and her half-brother David became more noticeable. She started to dislike his personality and habits, but they did share one common issue. Both were using illegal drugs. To support her addiction, Jamie began stealing pills from her job at a local hospital to sell. Meanwhile, David began a relationship with a girl named Carly Scher, who frequently visited and sometimes stayed for long periods, which annoyed Jamie. Additionally, David also befriends a young man named Jason. Then, he invited Jason to move in with them, which upset Jamie. She didn't like Jason, so she treated him badly. She felt uncomfortable in her own home, and her relationship with David became increasingly strained. They argued frequently, and many of the arguments stemmed from David bringing Jason to live with them. The noise from David's parties even led neighbors to call the police on occasion. Whenever Jamie tried to address the situation, David reacted with anger and threatened violence. Over time, Jamie fell into depression. Her father, Arthur, who she often spoke with on the phone, noticed something was off with her. Although she never shared the details of her troubled relationship with David, but Arthur could see she having problems. However, even if she had confided in Arthur, it likely wouldn't have changed anything, as their family viewed David as a kind and caring person. Jamie visited her friends and shared her feelings of fear and sadness. She confided that she was afraid of her half-brother David, particularly because of his violent behavior, and she lived in constant worry that he might attack her at night. On July 5, 2016, David stole a forklift from a construction site and used it to take equipment from there. After committing the theft, he set the vehicle on fire to cover his tracks. He was not alone. His accomplice Carly was with him. Additionally, he had taken over Jamie's house without her consent. He wanted to make changes that she did not approve of, leading to more arguments between them. During one heated argument, David violently struck Jamie, hitting her in the face and stomach, and demanded that she leave. Jason, a friend of David's who was present, did nothing to intervene and simply watched. Jamie left and spent the night at a friend's house. Afterward, he told Jason that Jamie was a burden and suggested that he should kill her. The next day she returns home, which makes he feel even more disgusted as he assumes he is the owner of the house. On June 9, 2016, Jamie spent the day at her father Arthur's house. Then, she returning home, she planned to pack her belongings and leave for good. However, when she got home, she found her brother David with Carly. As soon as Carly saw Carly left the house, leaving her and he at home together. He, still angry, confronted she, which led to a heated argument. The situation became tense and led to a fight, as a result of which he overpowered and killed her. To dispose of Jamie's body, David dismembered it. Afterward, he attempted to burn some of the body parts on a spit in the backyard, which caught Carly's attention. She noticed him with a lit fire, which was unusual since he typically didn't cook outside. When she asked him about it, he said that before Jamie left, Jamie lit a fire. A few days later, David stole a car, packed a suitcase, and drove 20 minutes north to Snohomish. He then abandoned the suitcase containing Jamie's dismembered remains by the side of the road. As days went by without any news of Jamie, his daughter, Arthur, grew increasingly worried, especially when David drove to his house to ask if he had heard anything about Jamie. It was unusual for she to go missing like this, which made Arthur suspect that something was wrong. He decided to reach out to some of Jamie's friends, but none of them had seen her or had any information. On June 17, 2016, Arthur went to Jamie's house, but she was not there either. In his desperation, he called over a police officer and reported his youngest daughter, Jamie, as missing. Almost a week after the crime occurred, David sent a message to Stephanie from an unknown number pretending to be Jamie. His intention was to prevent her family from worrying, but this plan did not work well. Meanwhile, the police were already investigating and looking into bank transactions. They were suspicious because there hadn't been any activity taking place on Jamie's bank account or credit card. Meanwhile, Arthur focused on seeking help through social media, hoping someone would provide information about his daughter's whereabouts. 1 month after Jamie went missing, early in the morning, investigators went to David's home to execute a search warrant. This area quickly had many police officers appearing. David and Jason were questioned, but investigators found nothing suspicious about their statements or actions. Many witnesses were interviewed, and they all confirmed that Jamie and David had a troubled relationship. Additionally, their house is often active at night, which causes more concern. For hours, investigators searched the backyard hoping to find clues, but they found nothing. For Arthur, it was a relief that no body was discovered in the yard. He and the other family members still held hope that Jamie was alive. Meanwhile, David pretended to be concerned and helped with the search. However, Jamie's case was not the only one the police were investigating. In September, the investigation into a burned forklift led authorities to identify David as the prime suspect. During questioning, agents uncovered digital photographs of stolen items, including a refrigerator and a stove, which matched the model numbers of appliances stolen from a trailer. Carly Schurer was interrogated by the police, and she revealed that David had confessed to her about the arson. Jason also confirmed to the agents that he saw David bringing the stolen appliances to his home. This information made David's situation much more complicated. He ultimately had no choice but to admit his guilt, leading to his arrest. David was then sentenced to 10 years and 2 months in prison for arson and second-degree burglary. A year after Jamie went missing, police received an anonymous tip suggesting they search around Jamie's house again. Investigators believed someone must have information about the case, so they quickly followed up on the tip. However, after digging for most of the day, they found nothing. Months passed, and nearly 2 years since Jamie went missing, when a public works crew in Snohomish County found a suitcase while picking up trash along the road. Inside, detectives quickly determined that the person in the suitcase had been murdered. However, due to the advanced decomposition, it was challenging to identify the victim or confirm gender. The forensic team sent samples for lab testing, and after 2 months, it was confirmed that the remains belonged to Jamie Haggard. Evidence pointed to David as the main suspect. GPS data from a stolen car showed that he had driven near the location where Jamie's remains were found. Additionally, police discovered that the blanket used to wrap the remains belonged to Jason and had been stolen by David in an attempt to frame Jason. As a result, David was charged with murder. On Monday, October 28, 2019, David Haggard was charged with second-degree murder. The following day, a jury found him guilty, and his bail was set at $2 million. On Friday, December 5, 2019, David appeared in the King County courtroom for his sentencing hearing. Prosecutors asked for the maximum sentence of 22 years in prison. Meanwhile, the defense argued that the sentence should be lighter, stressing that David should not be punished so harshly. Throughout the trial, David maintained his innocence and claimed he was not the one who committed the crime. He criticized the justice system for punishing innocent people and expressed his love for his younger sister Jamie. He insisting he could never harm her. When Stephanie spoke emotionally about her sister Jamie in court, David broke down in tears. The senior assistant prosecutor said that David had put Jamie's family, which was also his family, through pain for nearly 2 years by keeping the truth about her death from them. Ultimately, David was sentenced to 15 years in prison, followed by 3 years of community supervision, during which he would receive evaluation and treatment for his addictions. During this time, Jamie's children, Dylan and Madison Rose, mistakenly believed that their mother's absence is due to their father, Jake, not allowing them to contact her. Fortunately, Jake remarried, and his new wife adopted the girls, Dylan Va Madison, raising them as her own. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.